Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to this week's episode of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW 107.7 LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. I'm your host and producer of the show, Olga Peters, and this is where we talk about how everything in Montpelier shakes out for the rest of us. Today, I want to welcome to the show, of course, regular contributor, who is one of three reps from the town of Brattleboro, and you know her as Emilie Kornheiser. Hello, Emilie.
Hello, Olga. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. And candidate Ian Goodnow, who is running in the Democratic primary for the State House to represent Windham District 9. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Olga. Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. And for folks who may not be familiar with Ian, he has served on the Brattleboro Selectboard for 4 years, 2 of which he served as chair. He is also a justice of the peace. And in 2022, I'm so excited for you, Ian. In 2022, he received his, do you call it the JD degree, or because you read the law, which I think is so cool in Vermont, where you can study under an attorney to receive your training for 5 years, and you did that in 2022, and I'm forgetting what it's called though. It has a special name.
Yeah, I take every opportunity to plug it. It's called the Law Office Study Program. If you Google that and add Vermont to that, Vermont Law Office Study Program, you'll come up to a page on the Vermont Judiciary website and you can learn all about it. I don't have a JD. A Juris Doctorate is only for someone who goes to law school, and I didn't go to law school. I passed the bar exam and I joined the Vermont bar. Would probably be the way to phrase it in 2022.
Well, congratulations.
Fun fact about reading for the law, our former and quite incredible Supreme Court Justice, Marilyn Scoglin, read for the law when she was a single mother, even of some young kids. So we talk about apprenticeship in Vermont, but we don't necessarily always celebrate it when it happens, and it's pretty cool. I wonder if also, in addition to telling people about Ian, we could maybe explain where Windham 8 is for our listeners.
Is it 8 or 9?
First 9. Sorry. See, there we go. Can we talk about where Windham 9 is? Thank you.
Yes, Ian, go for that, since you're the one who's been knocking on everyone's doors.
Oh, yes. I have been spending a lot of time in Windham 9. Windham 9 is basically the northern the northeastern district of Brattleboro, and also just kind of the northern district. It's for our viewers and listeners who are familiar with Brattleboro, it's the downtown and all of Putney Road out a little bit past 91. The southern border is actually my street that I'm sitting on right now, Frost Street, which is basically the whetstone that runs along the sort of the bottom of the hill of Brattleboro. And then, out to Black Mountain and the West River is sort of the northern border. So it's the very northern border of Brattleboro down to the downtown, to the whetstone, and then out, basically bordering Emilie's district, which I think the road is East Orchard Street. Am I right on that, Emilie?
It's the east side of Orchard Street and then the east side of East Orchard Street.
Yes, thank you. So it's one of those ones that it divides down the middle of the road. And it's a great district. My office, the law firm I work for, is Costello, Valenti, and Gentry. And our office is right across the street from the courthouse, which is kind of at the top of the roundabout in the center of town. So I walk to work every day, and I walk right through kind of the middle of the heart of District 9. And so I felt it's been really great walking in other parts of the district that I don't walk through all the time, because it's a big area, and there's a really diverse population of different Vermonters who are living their lives in District 9 that I haven't met before. So it's been pretty great.
And what are some of the things you're hearing from people when you're knocking on their doors?
Yeah, and that's a lot of what I'm doing is listening. some people know me, some have heard about me, and some have never met me. So I'm introducing myself, or reacquainting myself with folks. But then I mostly am listening. And I think what I hear about the most is concern about affordability in Vermont, about the shrinking middle class, the ability to retire here and live on a fixed income. Some of these things are things that I heard as the chair of the select board for the last 2 years and on the board for the last 4. But hearing them from a perspective of potentially representing this district in Montpelier, I think is a whole different scope. We're talking on the Brattleboro level of approximately $24 million budget, and the state budget is a lot bigger than that. So yeah, those are the big ones. There's also people confused about kind of what's going on with education. Also about trash pickup. And then a lot of people asking me questions about things that are happening on the select board right now, because I think one of the things that I was told when my term ended on the board in March of this year, and one of the things that every previous board member told me that I served with was people will still think that you're on the select board and you will still get questions about what's going on the board now. And so, answering questions where I can about what's currently happening on the select board.
Emilie, do you have a question for Ian?
No, I think I think one of the fun parts about all of this is sort of talking to Vermonters about how all the different levels of government work and like how they can make a difference. I remember last time I was knocking on folks' doors a couple of years ago, pretty much everyone wanted to talk to me about rescue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that actually is something I know very little about because that's a select board issue. And so it's fun to talk about sort of like how our state government fits into the national landscape of all that's happening, and like what we can do here based on all of the horrors that are happening nationally, and then how what we do at the state level sort of enables things to happen locally. And it's a fun thing. Do you I've been thinking a lot this season about the gift that running for the first time gives you, to like be aspirational, to not know the answers to questions. I'm curious, like how much you feel obligated to like have a solution to every problem, and how you navigate that.
Yeah, great question. I think it reminds me a lot of when I first ran for the select board, and it reminds me a lot of like the first times I was in a courtroom, where you start, you start to understand how much you don't understand, and that's a pretty shocking experience. And so I think where I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of passion about this work, and so I think I've been very interested and engaged in it, and so I have a lot to talk with people about. But one of the things that I think is really important when it comes to any kind of service, especially public service, is humility, and being able to tell people when you don't have a solution, but you're aware of the concern, and you're hearing people, and you're going to bring that knowledge and the information that you have from people, and you're going to bring that to the work that you do representing them. I think that that's a lot of times more important than thinking that you have the solution, or you've got the silver bullet that's gonna solve all of Vermont's housing crisis, or something like that, because you're not. And the reality is, and I think people can see that one person isn't going to resolve this, and it's going to be us all working together. And so I think one of the ways I've navigated it is bringing people into the conversation and hearing from them about how their concern impacts their lives. And that helps inform me as I move forward and forming my opinions and trying to understand how we can all grapple with these big issues that are facing Vermont.
Yeah, it's
So
an interesting thing when I see new members come in and they ran on this one very specific issue. And the legislative work means grappling with like 50 different issues in a week, right?
Yeah.
And so seeing how sort of the fish out of water feeling that that can cause for folks who might not have been as focused on hearing about the full needs of their community before they walked in the door. And so I think you never know what problems we're going to encounter in the next year. So I think it's really all about sort of knowing the folks that you represent. And then once you're around for a while, you can often solve big problems. But the first couple of years, it's just totally all about the collaboration and finding the cracks in the system where you can like tweak things a little bit, you know? Yeah. Olga, you were going to say something and I jumped in. I'm sorry.
that's fine. So one question that hopefully we will be able to have as many candidates from Windham County on the show before the primary as possible. So one question I'm asking all of them is, how do you believe, how do you see the role of government in people's lives, and how do you feel it should function? For example, a lot of people have theories on government. Oh, it should be really big, or no, it should be very small with low taxes, and all these thoughts on governments. So I'm curious about yours.
Yeah, I am not going to sit here and opine government philosophy for a while. My answer is it needs to be responsive, transparent, and it needs to work in tandem with every level. And it needs to be meeting the needs of the community that it serves. So that starts all the way down I started as an alternate on the Developmental Review Board, which is a quasi-judicial body in Brattleboro. And there are great people who serve on that. And it goes all the way up to Montpelier, to the federal government, and every level in between. And I think that those tenets of good governance apply to every single level. It's actually one of the things that I want to bring to my service if District 9 chooses me to represent them is integrating at least two of those levels of governance, which is the municipal to the state level. I think that our reps have done incredible work for Brattleboro and our senators. I think that our municipal government is also doing great work. And there is only more strength and productive work that can come from bringing those two groups together more. One of the things that I worked on the select board this last year was bringing the delegation for Windham County to select board meetings to talk about priorities coming from the board and the community, and then also hearing about what was happening in Montpelier during the session. And so, if District 9 elected me, you've got somebody who is just the chair of the select board who hired the town manager we have now, who has a really close working relationship with the municipal government. And I think that that's really important for good governance.
Mm-hmm. I hear what you're saying, Ian, and I think I like what you're saying, but I'm curious from Emilie just to hear, we are a Dillon rule state. So a lot of power tends to come from the top down as far as governmental structures go. Where do you think the movement is for more collaboration, or is it possible? Are things kind of set in stone? What are your thoughts on that, Emilie?
I mean, on the Dillon's rule issue, which, well, I think we have done whole episodes about that, long ago, years ago. But, Jeanette White, that was one of her priorities for at least a decade and was not able to even come close to getting it through while she was chair of the Senate Government Operations Committee. It's something that we've tried in various iterations, including just like a pilot based on really successful work in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Vermont League of Cities and Towns tried this very funny and unconstitutional workaround that also didn't work. And so I think sort of changing the basic tenets of like how government responsibility and legality sort of functions, I think is going to be a really heavy lift. But I think there are a lot of opportunities aside from that. I think one, the federal government since the 70s has really devolved responsibility to localities, but not devolved resources to localities. And then the state sort of does a similar thing with towns. And so I think that's a real place where we could put some real strength, is making sure that municipalities actually have the resources that they need for their devolved responsibilities. I think there's a lot to do about, I'm not going to call it government on the county level, but resources being offered on the county level. That is a real opportunity for municipal collaboration and transition. But then sort of like the hardest part is the integration and what integration as a legislator means. So I would love to do much deeper collaborative work with our federal delegation. And I talk to some of them very, very regularly. But without staff to sort of talk to staff, and our federal delegation gets to have staff, the sort of realities of the day-to-day decision-making of that is really hard. It would take probably like weekly meetings to stay as aligned as we probably should be. And I think it's really exciting how we've started having these twice a year meetings with the select board. Thanks to Ian's leadership when he was chair, and that's great. The sort of next step from that and sort of questions around, like, I know, as a legislator, I stayed in regular touch with Ian, who was chair. I wasn't able to stay in touch with every single select board member individually. We can't email them and be in an email chain with them as a group because of public meeting laws, which makes communication unbelievably difficult if you're not in real life together. And so the question, and then for like I guess it's who and how is coordinating is a really big question. I'm now rambling a bit, but like, it doesn't necessarily make the most sense for like Patrick Moreland to talk to me about grant opportunities. It makes sense for him to be talking to ACCD about grant opportunities, right? And so where in state government as it functions, should those kinds of collaborations be happening? It's not necessarily with the state legislator. It might be with areas of state government that don't actually necessarily have the collaborative capacity that they should to coordinate with municipalities. And if we can't coordinate with Brattleboro, with all of Brattleboro's resources, like, Pomfret is doomed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Emilie. I appreciate that insight. I always find it fascinating, Vermont, we're such a small state, so we can communicate with each other very easily, and yet there are some structural things in place that might inhibit or help or whatever. Just based on what Emilie said, Ian, what are you kind of sitting with right now? I know it's fresh information, but what are you sitting with?
Well, I don't even think any of it's really fresh information. I definitely know and am aware of all of those. I don't think roadblock's the right word. It's just like the reality of the structure. It makes me think, Olga, that the work that we started on the board with making those connections more routine is really just the start. And that was actually one of the hardest things for me leaving the select board. My term ended. And I really believe that a very quick tangent for people who are thinking about running for the Brattleboro Selectboard. I really think that the structure is great. You have three 3-year seats, 2 1-year seats. You can run for a 1-year seat, which is what I did. You can learn whether you like it or not. And for me, I learned I fell in love with it. And then you can run for a 3-year seat, and then you can give 4 years of your life to Brattleboro and to the municipal government. And then you can let one of the people who's in your 3-year, who's in a 1-year seat, run for your 3-year seat when your 4 years are up. I really believe that that's like the perfect amount of time to serve and to give to your community, and then you're kind of perpetuating this good system. And so one of the things that was tough about that was you leave a lot of stuff on the table still, you know, a lot of work that's in progress, or there's going to be next steps. And I'm sure that that's exactly what it's like being in the legislature. Yeah, so, but more specifically, you know, I could probably spend like the whole day talking about Dillon's rule. And having basically having grown up here and spent most of my adult life in Vermont, I have a lot of feelings about Dillon's rule, and it's a pretty complex issue. I think where I really agree with Emilie is giving the municipalities the financial ability to work on the issues that they know are happening in their community is huge, and we can always work on that more. And then I think as far as those connections and who Patrick Moreland's our assistant town manager, so who Patrick should talk to about a grant or something like that. I think keeping the dialogue open between the representatives and them to help them know who to talk to. And that comes, you know, and that comes with just keeping those communication lines open, and then also regularly meeting with that body, with the select board, or being at a select board meeting, so that you can also hear from the community. Because I don't think that the select board meetings are representative of like all of Brattleboro. They certainly are not. And there are a lot of people who don't go to them or watch them. But they're at least another place that people that we elect can hear from folks about their concerns and their interests in what's happening in government.
Thank you. We have just about 5 minutes left.
Wow.
I'm gonna in this first half. So
I just love talking, Olga. I just love talking.
It's a good thing for a lawyer and a select board member and potential future rep. You know, one thing you talk about on your website, which Emilie and I have talked about on the show a lot, is affordability and making Vermont affordable for everyone. But one thing I think, Emilie, you'll agree we have found is not everyone defines affordability the same way. So for you, when you say, let's make Vermont affordable, what specifically would you want to target? What areas of someone's financial life?
Yeah. So for me, and this is okay. So, and I realize we have 5 minutes. Appreciate you.
We can come back
that,
after break.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why I'm running, is that I think the perspective of the person that you put in the seat matters, and the place in their life that they are matters. So like, I am 32. I own a home in Brattleboro. Ruth Schaefer, my wife, and I purchased it. I think we're going on 3 years ago. It's incredibly difficult at this time and at where I am in my life to for someone to purchase a home. So a lot of people are renting, and a lot of my dear close friends in Vermont, family members, rent in Vermont. And so when it comes to affordability, to me, it's all about housing. So it's for people who own homes, who are young, trying to start families here. It's for people who are renters, either lifelong renters or people who are renting and trying to eventually own a home here. And it's for our Vermonters who are older, who are retiring in place here, who want to stay the rest of their lives here because they probably have family here and they have grandkids here, or they have grandkids other places, but they want to keep their connection to Vermont here and bring those people back to Vermont. So what specifically, you know, I think that one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people knocking on doors is that the tax rate increase this year was a ton. You know, it's I think for Emilie, you can correct me because I probably don't have the exact number. It's like probably going to be 15% for Brattleboro.
Again, this is not, your tax rate will not be 15%. It's an increase of 15% over last year.
Of course.
And I'm not, I know you know that, Ian. I just want to like that. I think that numbers are I'm
sorry, a 15% increase.
No, I'm not correcting you. I'm just clarifying for the record.
No, and I appreciate the clarity and clarification. And you know, I often in depositions, I like ask really long, rambly questions, and a lot of times the witness has to like be like, "What are you asking me?" And I appreciate it because I want people to know what I'm talking about, understand what I'm asking, or what I'm trying to explain. So yeah, 15% increase is a lot. So and so I think when it comes down to specificity, it's trying to keep the tax rate at a growing at a rate that is going to be affordable for people at every level. So that's one half of it, and then the other half is basically trying to and how specifically we are alleviating the housing crisis is something that we could talk about a lot. And there's some good work already happening in the legislature about this, but working on creating housing at every level, because that will help alleviate the pressure on renters who right now basically have no options at all. And that means that the rents are incredibly high, and the pay that people are getting isn't enough to be able to afford the rent that they have to pay in the communities that they want to live in Vermont. And that means that they're overburdened, and then they're not able to stay here, and they probably leave. So yeah, so I think like affordability for me, it's all about how you can actually live and thrive in Vermont. And that hits every single level all the way up from renting, for your first apartment in Burlington, like I did, all the way up to, people I'm talking to on Wantasca Drive who like want to, retire here and are worried about being able to afford it.
Thank you. So Ian, Emilie, and I are going to take a break while we hear from some of our underwriters here on WVEW 107.7 LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. So don't touch your dial. We will be right back. Welcome back to the second half of the Montpelier Happy Hour here on WVEW 107.7 LP Brattleboro, your community radio station. I'm your host and producer of the show, Olga Peters, and if you're just joining us, I'm speaking with Ian Goodnow, who is running in the Democratic primary to represent Windham District 9 in the State House. And I'm also speaking with regular contributor Representative Emilie Kornheiser, who is, I don't know, District 7? Is that what you are technically, Emilie?
Which is very convenient because it used to be District 1, and you can add a little line at the top to correct any old signage.
That is helpful. Good old Sharpies coming to the rescue.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah. I've wondered a lot, Emilie, about like with making all this campaign stuff, how much of it you should keep sort of evergreen and how much of it you should add dates and stuff to. I feel like it's like one of those many little detail questions that there's not necessarily an answer to.
Okay,
oh no, there are answers. We can.
Yes.
Oh, yeah?
Emilie,
Okay.
you and I should have like a masterclass episode sometime for anyone who's considering running.
Yeah.
Just some quick housekeeping things, folks, before we dive it back into the show. We want to thank BCTV for taking the video version of the happy hour and sharing it with stations across the state. And Emilie, what should we remind listeners of right now?
Well, Olga, the views and opinions expressed here on the Montpelier Happy Hour are those of the hosts and the guests, respectively, not the station, nor platform, nor employees, nor friends, nor wild turkeys roaming the yard that anyone might happen to encounter. Just
why, thank you. So, Ian, we were talking before the break about affordability. And I think, Emilie, you wanted to, and for you, affordability comes down a lot to housing and making sure people can afford their housing at every stage of their life. Emilie, I think there was something you wanted to add to that.
I totally agree on housing. And I think it's sort of part of a stack and a fairly short list and large stack of sort of the non-negotiable expenses in someone's life, right? And it's housing, it's family care, whether that's child care, partner care, elder care, the costs of those things, healthcare,
Mhm.
And those sort of non-negotiable costs of life often squeeze out, food costs, add those pressures, student loan costs, right? And they are significant in Vermont, but they're mostly significant in Vermont because our wages are
Yeah.
so much lower than other places. And I think it's added an extra pressure here when more of us can be working out of state and still living here. It's created we already had a wealth divide in Vermont. We already had a divide between sort of college educated folks and folks that weren't. And so there's also the divide of folks who are getting their financial resources from out of state and folks who are fully participating in the local economy, and how that changes our relationship to housing costs or taxation or student loans. And even when we're talking about all of those costs or talking about property taxation, Vermonters that have mortgages and Vermonters that have paid off their mortgages, that's a really big difference too, right? And so I really appreciate just any time on the show we can dive into the nuance of the big A affordability question, because
Yeah.
it's so different to different people. There's a Vermont Digger legislator quiz, not quiz,
Like
questionnaire
questionnaire.
they want us all to answer. And there's the first 10 questions are yes, no questions, which is terrible because everything is more complicated than yes and no. And one of them is, do you think Vermonters are better off than they were 10 years ago? And I'm like, who? Which Vermonters? What are you talking about? You can't possibly expect people to answer this question. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I think affordability sort of in that same vein.
And if I can,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, Emily. And I think that every time I'm answering a question like Olga's, it's like how to capture so many things in a short enough answer that isn't taking up the entire show. I appreciate you bringing those other points in. And for me, I just boil it back down to what are we actually talking about when we're talking about affordability? It's making sure that the people who live here can continue to live here, that they have access to what I believe are human rights like housing, and also that we can keep people here and we can invite and welcome new people to live in Vermont, because we are facing an aging population and a state that we're going to need to keep the young Vermonters who are growing up here. We're going to need to invite more people to come here, and I really believe that that's a part of Vermont's future, like it or not. So I think that that's a really important part of this when we're talking about affordability. Like, why are we even talking about it? And it's because I care about the people who live here, and I also care about people who want to live here, and that's usually the major barrier. So.
And it's, the legislature is and has been and probably will be for quite a while really made up of mostly folks who don't struggle to pay their bills, because
they can afford to
serve.
take the small stipend and serve. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think the more we can do to make sure that new folks coming in, that legislators who are already there, that have a sense of what it means to struggle to pay their bills, that makes a really big difference in how we shape those legislative conversations, because they're not abstract for us. They're like ourselves and our neighbors and our friends and our family. Yeah.
And that I totally agree. And that's why I think it matters who you put in your representative seats based on their life experience and where they are in their lives. You need people, you need diverse experience, diverse backgrounds. It's going to make the best laws. That's what we need. And I really think that one of the things that needs to change as far as Montpelier goes is how we pay our reps and our senators. I'm not running for this seat for the money. and I think that, and that's fine, but I think that it is a major barrier to get more people to take the leap and run for a seat. because it's a massive sacrifice to their lives and their livelihoods, their families already, just the time commitment alone, but the financial component too. So we're not in the current system. We're not really encouraging the level of diversity we could for the people who represent us.
Mm-hmm. So, going back to that idea of affordability and housing, you talk about housing as a human right. And I'm wondering how, in your mind, could Vermont ensure in housing as a human right? Do you see it as something, I mean, not only do we need to create more housing, I think everyone kind of agrees on that one, but, do you see it as something like we need new policies to make sure people can not only get into housing, but stay in housing? What's your thoughts around that?
Boy, I mean now we're getting into the many levels that need to be attacked when it comes to addressing the crisis. And the first response is just the amount of available housing needs to be addressed, right? So we just need more stock. It doesn't, and where that comes from is a lot of different ways, right? Like it needs to be built new housing, that's incredibly expensive to do. It's got to be converting existing housing. It's got to be adding housing onto lots that are additional dwelling units. It's breaking up bigger buildings that have like our single family where the owner wants to downsize their life, but then be able to have income from a rental unit inside the building. That's actually something that I've talked to a number of people in my district about. It's knocking on the door, talking to an older Vermonter who is interested in maybe turning their big Victorian into a multi-unit housing structure, but they can't afford to do that work, or if there are programs to access, they struggle to access the programs, or they're priced out of it because they make too much money. So those are like the kind of things that I'm hearing about as far as like actually building stock. And that I think is like step one. As far as policy goes, I believe that we need to protect tenants in our laws and our policies, and we do. I think we need to continue to. I think as far as other policy work goes, having housing available for people who are struggling with addiction and mental health issues needs to be something that is available. That would probably be a policy area that we would need to work on. I'm sure we could talk for the rest of the hour about the motel program and sort of what we've learned from that and the struggles that kind of type of housing can create, both for the state and also for the communities that housing is in. So that's kind of my initial answer, Olga, but there's a lot more to it. Clearly, yeah, and then also other policy. The state has started on Act 250, but there's more work to be done there too. Because in Act 250 is such a tricky one, because I think that a lot of Vermonters would say, yeah, we don't want billboards here. We don't want a lot of the things that Act 250 protects against. But then at the same time, it can impact innovation and additional housing construction in a way that's preventing us from really addressing the issue. So those are kind of my first thoughts on it.
This is a bit of a random thought, but whenever we start talking about housing and systems, I always go back to a conversation I had with Kevin Geiger, who is up at Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission. And he focuses a lot on housing. And, he really has the philosophy that if we want to make change, we need to make our systems as simple as walking up to an ice cream truck and saying, I want a chocolate ice cream cone. or I want a strawberry ice cream cone, and you know, like make it that simple. Um, and I always just kind of sit with that, like, what would it really take to make our creating new housing that simple? You know, for him, he would like to see kind of regional centers that are set up as housing specialists. And so that if someone had that Victorian home, per se, as example, they could call this number and say, I have a 3-story Victorian home. I want to turn it into apartments. How do I do that? The specialist would come down and say, well, you could do this, this, and this. This is options. This is what it would cost. And then work out a payment plan, or if there are other resources to bring those in. And then at the end, the person could even decide, no, I want you to manage the apartments. I don't want to manage them myself. And then they could work out that as well. So it's like support at every level, kind of this wraparound services. But I just, yeah, that's my random thought, is always like, how can we simplify our systems so people can really access them easily?
You know, we are starting to do some steps towards that in terms of, you know, part of the reason that Brattleboro is going to be exempt from most Act 250 requirements is because we have this really robust planning department, right? And so moving towards this idea that there are model plans even for model housing that are just sort of immediately approvable,
like the Housing for
huge.
All program.
Yeah.
Toolkit.
Yeah.
And that, like, that is a huge step. And sort of when the Housing Trust, the Housing Conservation Board, also has sort of a tried and true stack of like how you fund a project. What's missing from that, and there's a lot missing from that, is if someone wants to do something like huge and innovative, you know, like Chloe's taking on a Prouty, or that very small scale that you're talking about, someone has a project that they want to convert. And it's part of this like disconnect between sort of, we have this municipal level and these, you know, service providers like the Housing Trust or our town planning department. You have ACCD and the housing department at the agency there. They don't see their role as providing technical assistance to communities or to individuals in communities. And so there's this huge disconnect. And maybe it is, you know, and then we have our county housing commission where it's just people volunteering their time basically. And so there's like that disconnect of what it actually means for people to access government in a meaningful way. And part of it is because we don't have the right level of government for people to access. I don't think it's necessarily fair for the town to have to provide all of that, because we want people in Putney to also build housing, or people in Guilford to build housing. And the state feels that its power is sort of too separate, and the Scott administration has really no interest in administering much of anything these days. And so there's really like that disconnect of what it would mean for someone to, and, you know, sometimes I get overwhelmed, like, do I want to, you know, a waffle cone or a wafer cone or a sugar cone? But, you know, is it a creamy? Is it hard scoop? There are a lot of choices, kid size, large, medium, small, you know, but that there are limited choices, that there is a way you can just sort of take a path instead of like having to go out and buy your own ice cream maker. I think there is a lot of potential for that. And the planning commissions, I think, are doing a great job sort of leading the call for what is needed. You know, Chris at our own planning commission will just say that, you know, if we're not going to fix all the wastewater, we should just stop even trying.
Well, speaking of the Windham Regional Commission, they're just starting very, very baby steps on multi-town regional planning around housing, which I hope everyone's keeping an eye on, because I think it's going to be very exciting.
And this is going to be the tension, right, of like, we don't have really a lot of like county level government structure in Vermont. Yeah, that's kind of like a lot of this regional work kind of would benefit from more of a county level structure, but without the actual systems in place, it kind of gets, you know, it's in pockets, you know, and it's not all consolidated, which I think speaks, Olga, to your point of like, yeah, how can we make these systems easier for people to access And kind of, pivoting a little bit here, but like one of the things I do want to mention and is a part of this conversation is like, I think a lot about where people actually interface with their government, right? Like that's something that I thought a lot about when I was on the select board. Something I think a lot about when I'm in court. I mostly do criminal defense work, so I'm over in the Brattleboro courthouse like all the time, every week, and yeah, it one of the things that interests me about running for rep is being one of those places where I can be a place where people interface with their government. Maybe one of the only places that they really interface with their government, other than paying like a water and sewer bill or like going to a select board meeting. But being that advocate and that channel for concern, interests, questions, and then helping people understand what's going on is something that I am really interested in. I'm very passionate about. I think I have talent in doing that work. And so it draws me to this work, and it's one of the reasons why I'm running. And I bring it up because I just think about it because, yeah, making things accessible has to do with how people actually like plug into the government. And that can be really difficult and like difficult and scary, and there can be barriers that some we see and some we don't really think about. And so the work in breaking those barriers down and also putting people in place who are going to be effective as being the recipients of our citizens interacting with the government is what we need.
So in your work as a lawyer, I did see also on your website, you talked about criminal justice. Going back to that issue of how people access government and interact with government, I'm sure you're seeing some really difficult stories at times. What are some of are you seeing the same barriers come up over and over again that are impacting people's lives? Are you seeing themes like, what's it teaching you?
Yeah. So just very quickly about my work. I'm a private criminal defense attorney. I also I help the court out when they have conflicts for doing arraignments. It's called doing a Rule 5. So I go over to court every week to do this because there's a lot of conflicts with the public defender's office, and they need attorneys to come over and basically represent the client for a day. I also am one of the attorneys in my firm who work on what's called a serious felony contract. So we have a contract with the state of Vermont for cases where the defendant is charged with a crime that could result in a life imprisonment. And so those cases, they open up those cases for private firms to help alleviate some of the burden on the public defender's office. Doesn't mean the public defender's office don't also do these cases. They absolutely do. But when there isn't availability or it's just too much, that's when it kind of siphons off to one of the private firms who has a contract like this. So I have one of those contracts, where my firm has one of those contracts. I work on that contract, and that work has brought me to every prison in Vermont. I go to visit clients and do work there, and into almost every courtroom in Vermont probably at this point, because the contract isn't regionally based, so it's just handling cases all over the place. And what I have seen both in that work and also in the private work I do and the work I just do for the court is that it's underfunded in every part. So we don't have enough prosecutors, we don't have enough public defenders, we don't have enough judges, and we definitely don't have enough administrative staff in the courtrooms. And so what results is a massive backlog in the cases. And what happens with a massive backlog is basically the delay that people have from the moment that they're charged and arraigned to when there's an ultimate outcome can be years. And that justice delayed is justice denied. Like we need to be able to have systems that have cases that move through the system at a fast enough rate that they can result in a just outcome for the defendant, the victims, the system and the community, right? Because the faith in the justice system matters. And we're seeing that all the way up at the federal level, all the way down here. It matters to think that when there is a crime potentially committed in your community, that it's going to move through the system at a rate where there's actually a result and justice achieved. And that's like one half of it, Olga. And then the other half of it, and this is something else that I see, is that we need more wraparound services for people who are first interacting with the criminal justice system at like the beginning of a charge. So like when you're arraigned and you have conditions of release, which I know is this like big buzzword that everyone's talking about now. I argue as a defense attorney about what those conditions are going to be. And a condition of release is basically like you're charged with a crime, you plead not guilty, and then the court says, all right, these are the things that you're going to need to comply with until next time you come to court. And this is what we're saying you have to do in order for you to leave today. And so you agree to those things, you sign, and then you're released out into the community. There are many people who are interfacing with the criminal justice world a lot who could benefit from having more services provided to them at the earlier stage. And so that means giving more. We need to fund those systems more. So that's like giving more money to pretrial services and probation, so that they can actually be providing services to these people who need them, instead of basically having them signing their conditions of release and then potentially re-offending really quickly because they haven't been really given any opportunity to not, because they haven't gotten any of the services they need. So really long answer, I apologize, but there's a lot to that, and there's more. I have a lot more I could say, but yeah, I really believe that this is one of those areas where, again, you've got somebody who may be interacting with the government for the first time in a while, and we could be serving them better, both as victims, defendants, and people in the community who are impacted by what's happening.
Thank you, Ian. I know, Emilie, that the state has done a little work around the criminal justice system to try to shorten some of people's time moving through the court system. But I'm just curious, based on what Ian has said from his experience, is it jogging anything for you, or?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
My chair is very creaky, so I've been muting when I feel very fidgety. I agree with everything Ian said, and the extent to which a slowed down court really is destructive of the basic tenets of like both our democracy and our justice system working is, played out in research as well as just sort of in like political science and ethical lines of reasoning. Like it absolutely needs to be an efficient and effective court system for any of this to work, for punishment, even like for the mechanism of punishment to work, if we believe in that. And so, this session, the House passed like a really comprehensive funding bill for our justice system that was paid for with some changes in our corporate tax law. So again, like folks who could most afford it would be strengthening our systems on behalf of all of us. And then a lot of that did get into the full budget. And that was it's exciting to see after so many years of the judiciary asking for help and really not receiving it. And it is, you name the administrators, that's a huge part of the backlog. But it's true across the system, and it's something we need to keep an eye on. And I think Vermonters would be shocked at how much all of these sort of complaints around conditions of release and that our, penalties aren't harsh enough, and all of that will be actually remedied. The symptoms of that will be remedied by a justice system that actually just works more efficiently and effectively because it has the resources it needs to function.
Thank you.
And that's great, Emilie. And I appreciate that work. And I'm sure that there is more to be done. And I think one of the things that's important for people to know, or to just consider, is that, it's not COVID. It's not just COVID related. The backlog in Windham County, that's Brattleboro, where I live, and we all live, the backlog increased in the last 6 months. So yeah, it's not just COVID. COVID made it a lot worse. but it's not just COVID. It is a systemic issue in a lack of prioritization and funding of this essential service that the government's responsible for, which is the justice system.
And I think that's true for so many of the things that got worse during COVID. It's that it was not COVID that caused them. It sort of widened all the cracks in our existing very cracked system. I just want to say, Ian, how incredible. There are very few people serving the legislature right now who have that sort of like direct eyes on that problem and the realities of how it plays out. And so I think having your voice in the mix of these conversations as we continue to fight for resources for our justice system will be really valuable.
I appreciate that, Emily. Thank you.
Well, and on that note, we're just out of time. So I want to check in quickly, Ian. Two things. One, what do you want to leave listeners with? And two, how can they reach out to you if they have questions?
Yes, great questions. Okay, what I want to leave listeners with is I am a political optimist. I believe in the future of Vermont, and I believe in the future of Brattleboro. I really believe that we are on an upward trajectory. I think about that digger question that Emily referenced earlier. I believe that in the next 10 years, Vermonters are going to be better off and are going to be able to live and thrive in this amazing state. I love Vermont so much, and I love living here, and I want to put all of my energy and work into making it a successful place to live, have families, and thrive. So, and I think that's important to just mention, because it can be this work and the things that we talk about can be pretty negative. And so, but I believe that I couldn't do this work if I didn't really believe that in my heart and soul. So I just want to, that's how I want to end on the note I want to end on. And then as far as reaching me, yeah, so you can go to my website, which is Ian, IAN, Goodnow, GOODNOW.com. You can also email me at iangoodnowvt@gmail.com. You can also give me a call at 802-416-9880. And there's more information on my website if you want to learn a little bit more about me. I'd be happy to have a chat, sit down for a cup of coffee, and learn about you.
Wonderful. Well, good luck in the August 13th primary. And of course, you'll be one of the folks up on the forum at Brooks Library on July 8th at 6 p.m. So people can attend to that as well. Emily, if people want to learn more about you.
Folks can go to emilykornheiser.org and you'll find links to all of the various ways to be in touch. Would love to talk to you soon.
And as always, the Montpelier Happy Hour is on WVEW 107.7 LP Brattleboro, your community radio station, every Friday at 2, rebroadcast every Wednesday morning, and wherever you subscribe to your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody.